Welcome to another edition of the channel's Mailbag. So what is Mailbag? Well, Mailbag is the part of the channel that you guys actually control. It's based on comments, questions, general feedback that you guys leave either on the YouTube channel, the website, or through one of my social media feeds. Mailbag contains what I think the answer is, what I think my view of the comment is, or sometimes, I just throw it out to the wider audience and say, what do you guys think? That's what Mailbag is. So let's get in to the first mailbag of this session. Remember, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Go over to Instagram and follow me there. Go over to Facebook, follow me there. That's where the normal notices are. And consider becoming a Patreon. Next one comes from David One Bone. I say David One, it's David with a one bone. And this was in respect to MUSE Receptor ISO image, cloning the MUSE Receptor Quattro mailbag I did in January 2025. And David writes, you mentioned possibility of being able to supply a link for a receptor drive image, Patreon donation, etc. I might be tempted, however, I've been doing a bit of research. Also working on a couple of units myself. Apparently the factory OS is linked to the MAC address. The implications of this, I was wondering whether perhaps an image from another system will work, however authorized won't work. Then it's from another system will not work, even though it's authorized, I think is what David was saying there. They mentioned spoofing the MAC address. Since MUSE no longer offering support, it might not matter anyway, although do you know if an image from another system will work at all? So, bottom line is, first thing he said about, is there an image available? Right, I have a MUSE Receptor 1 Rev C base image that I have cloned onto a 1 terabyte hard drive. Okay, so the original disk was a 256 disk. I've got it on a 1 terabyte hard drive. It's a mechanical drive, it's not an SSD because the receptor does not support an SSD natively. Okay, so that's the first thing. I do have that. If you want a copy of that particular drive, then make me a good donation on either through Patreon, or you can, if you log on to YouTube, you should find my PayPal account. You can do it that way. I don't mind how you make it, but the reason why I'm not supplying this for gratis is because, as I've said many times, this thing takes an amount of money to run. And therefore, if you want something from me, I'm not saying you can't have it. I'm just saying, please make a donation to the running costs of the channel, because that is effectively how I keep the channel running. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, now I was originally under the impression that the OS was tied to the MAC address of the receptor, because I was specifically told that by somebody, okay, who was meant to be a receptor expert. That turns out not to be true. The license image is or was tied to the MAC address, but I can take the hard drive out of, I've got two MUSE Receptors, MUSE Receptor 1 Rev Cs, okay, and I can take the hard drive out of one and put it in the other, and it works absolutely fine. Okay, it doesn't matter which one of the units it's in, as long as it's in a 1 Rev C, because the OS image is on the disk, the settings are on the disk. So when you move it from one to the other, it just reads the disk and says, okay, I'm running at this version of the OS. I've got these settings to load into memory. Job done, ready to go. Okay, so that's the reality, and I can turn around and say, I know it works because I've done it. So again, if you do need a 1 Rev C 1.7 OS image, I have got it. Get in touch. In terms of donation, $30, let's say, and you need to supply me with a hard disk because the ISO image is quite big. It's a terabyte. Okay. Next comment question comes from the Faxmania or Faximania. And this is in response to how to upgrade the firmware on the Roland Jupiter-X video I did in July 2021. Faximania writes, I missed a few firmware updates. I didn't have the time. Can I install the latest version right away, or do you have to install the missed ones one by one first? And this particular question gets quite a few people. But the reality is that the firmware updates on the Roland Jupiter-X, while cumulative, do not have to be installed in sequence. The latest firmware effectively overrides the previous firmware in memory as part of the update process. So, in short, you can jump from the release version of the firmware to the latest version of the firmware and not have to worry about any of the incrementals in between. Of course, when you're looking at the manual updates and functionality updates, you have to remember that the way that Roland do it is they actually list the updates by increment. So if you go from version 1 to version 10 for argument's sake, and I don't know what the current version of the Roland Jupiter-X is, but if you go from version 1 to version 10, the way Roland lists all the updates is they list version 2, version 3, through to version 10. So you don't get, here is version 10 with all the updates in it. You get, here is version 10 with the version 10 amendments. And then you have to read version 9, version 8, etc., to find all the other updates that have been added to the platform since the version you were on. Hope that makes a lot of sense.